host, Kevin Barrier, and welcome to 5Dubs Marketing Pros, where we highlight awesome brands and the stories behind them, and maybe just maybe geek out on all things marketing. All right, let's go. So today I'm excited to introduce two members of a brand that travels and performs all over the world, bringing animated films to life by perfectly synchronizing their musical sounds to the films they project on stage, leading their audiences through a world of musical mayhem and comedy. They demonstrate their mastery of jazz and classical music by incorporating pieces by renowned composers like Carl Stalling and Mozart, among others, in their show. Their six members hail from four different continents on this planet. They've opened for the New York Philharmonic, sold out the Blue Notes Jazz Club, as well as performed sold-out audiences at Edinburgh Fringe in Scotland. Their popularity has gotten them featured in over 50 publications, including but not limited to the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, BBC Radio, and NPR's All Things Considered. I am so excited to introduce Mark Phillips and Joel Pierson of the musical group The Queen's Cartoonist. Hey guys.
Hey.
Hello.
I'm pretty accurate, right? And everything. I mean, you guys are a pretty big deal. And full disclosure for anyone listening, I have had the pleasure of working with The Queen's Cartoonist on some of their marketing ventures for a little bit of time now. And you know, I like to think that relationship has grown into like the Hangover style Wolfpack friendship.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so so you're making me look bad. So the Queen's Cartoonist, for those that don't know, like, how did the Queen's Cartoonist get started?
I had this idea of trying to find a cross section between the golden age of animation and the golden age of jazz, which were sort of happening at the same time. And I was looking around, and I loved some of those composers that worked on the old film scores and cartoon scores, and some of the more kind of wacky jazz artists in the 1930s and 40s, and realized that no one was really talking about this stuff, and certainly no one was really playing the music, and definitely no one was in jazz was screening old films and cartoons and things while playing the music. So I started to work on some charts and figure out what would be available, what kind of music would be interesting, and called some friends and some people I didn't know in New York to start rehearsing.
Awesome. And so, Mark, for you're one of the members in the band that hail from a different continent than North America. So how did you get how did you journey from Australia, where you grew up and you originated from, over here to the United States?
I mean, for me, it was a case of finishing a classical music degree, wanting to play jazz, and deciding between doing another degree or going to the place where jazz is played the best and doing it that way. So I opted for that and just came and took lessons and hung out and kind of made my way through the scene that way. And then I was actually considering moving back. I was looking at jobs in military bands in Australia when a friend that I went to college with in Australia introduced me to Joel. And, he had this idea and I thought it was kind of cool. And I could see merit in it and kind of had this little gut feeling that was like, I think this is a path I need to follow. And here we are.
It's a pretty small world, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it. Yeah, that's awesome. So Mark, you and I were the first to connect between the Queen's Cartoonist and our agency, and we actually connected through a Facebook group.
Yes.
So, tell me a little bit about you had some needs from a social end,
Yeah.
and I think you guys understand and recognize the value in being able to connect with your audience on social media. Tell me, talk a
Yeah.
little bit about those early days and the social media landscape for you guys.
So we were doing it all in-house, and we're five jazz musicians that don't know a lot about social media and computers and algorithms. So I was basically fronting the task force doing this, and we're running some ads, putting $20 here and there into ads, and we're getting some traction and some followers and some comments and things like that. And we basically came across a situation where our reach and engagement dropped significantly for seemingly no reason. We didn't change anything, the same parameters, everything was the same, but we were getting way less reach and everything. And so I went on to the Facebook group that was like assistance with marketing or things like that, and posed the question about our brand. And we're doing exactly the same thing, and we just saw a huge drop off almost immediately. Um, and we got a few replies, and one of them was you, and you actually reached out to me personally and had some great advice and said if I need any other any other questions, I could reach out to you. So I did, and
Yeah.
yeah, and ever since, the band sort of refers to in other aspects of our team, finding a Kevin is kind of a
Mhm.
phrase we throw around now,
Oh,
because
that's
you've been
awesome.
such a great help. All starting from answering a Facebook thing.
Yeah, no, it's crazy how, like I said, like small world, even within the digital landscape. And I remember that. I remember when you posed your question. I did a little creeping on your website and on your social channels, and like I instantly fell in love with your brand. Like it was such an awesome brand. I started becoming obsessed with like the content you were putting out. Your content's brilliant. But before we talk about the content, because I definitely want to talk about that, Joel, for those who have never seen a show by the Queens Cartoonists, what they so your website dons it as like musical mayhem, right? And I've been to one of your shows. I went to your holiday show last year around Thanksgiving, and it was absolutely incredible. But for those who have never seen your show, like what could they expect?
Yeah, it's just funny you guys were talking about how you met. I forgot that it was a marketing Facebook group. I thought it was a Kardashianaholics Anonymous group you guys met on. I didn't realize that it was
Well,
more of
thanks
like a
for calling us out,
professional.
Joel.
Sorry, I guess that you lost the anonymous there. Rewatching all 20 years of action or whatever. Yeah, and
I
you
am
had to
not
give it up.
ashamed. I'm proud of it.
So yeah, in terms of what a
What I
show
have
is
to
like
work with.
for us, we we are we are trying to turn the kind of narrative of a jazz or classical concert upside down a little bit. We want to appeal to people who say, "Oh, I don't like jazz music. It's distant," or "Classical music is it's for old people," or I can't relate to these things. And we see so much value in all this music, and we are reaching people or trying to reach people through using animated films to do this. So the initial thought of golden age of jazz, golden age of animation has quickly turned into, well, what if we screen the films and play the music, and will that get people engaged in what would traditionally be considered like more a serious concert setting, like a concert hall, or like a theater or kind of thing, where a lot of people might just say, no, I'd rather just stay home. So because if we go and I mean, Mark knows we say this all the time in interviews and stuff, but if you say to someone, just a random person, do you want to come to my jazz concert? People will usually say no. They don't really want to do that. But if you say, well, do you like cartoons? And then the music is being played live and it's all kind of zany and synchronized and stuff, that gets people interested. So that's essentially our niche. So when you come to a concert, that's what you see. You see classic animated films, contemporary animated films, some classical music, some contemporary original music, and then we sort of tie it all up with sort of a musical circus kind of vibe where we have some sort of straight up comedy, like maybe jokes or things like that, and then sort of physical humor and clowning, and that all kind of comes from like, well, we're performing alongside these um, very wild animated characters. How can we sort of compete with that on stage? So when we do things on stage that you don't expect to see in a concert, that kind of helps bring the attention back to us sometimes. Otherwise, people will forget they're there and they'll just be watching cartoons.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing everything you guys do on stage. I mean, from Greg, who plays trumpet among other things, like his brass, right? From him, playing an instrument while wheeling on a mini scooter or a bike to Mark, who will belt out. It's the Jeopardy theme song, right? While at the same time solving a Rubik's Cube. Tell me where that came, because that is so when I saw you do that, full disclosure, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I got a Rubik's Cube because I was bound and determined to try to solve it and then text you and say, look, be proud of me. But I'm getting
Yeah.
close, but then I get frustrated and
Hmm.
I stop. So like where did that come from? Because that's one of many really visually eye-catching and just those wow moments. And there's a lot of wow moments in your show. Like
Yeah.
where did that come from?
One thing I've learned in this band since we started is to be very careful of what Joel knows about me and what I say around him because things end up in the show. And basically, what happened was we were, hanging out one day, probably after a show or something, and Rubik's Cubes come up. And I happen to mention that, when I was a teenager, I got bored one summer and taught myself how to do it. And I got myself to a point where I could do it in about a minute. And suddenly Joel's eyes lit up and it was, can you do it while playing a saxophone? Can you do this and that? And yeah, ended up in the show.
Yeah, and I'm honored to. I hope it's okay to share this, but I'm honored to be kind of in the team Slack channel. So sometimes I'm a fly on the wall, and I get to see some of these questions. Can I share a recent one, Joel, that you asked
Sure.
Greg? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
So, so I'll get these notifications on my phone at random times. And there was one from Joel posing to the rest of the band, or actually asking Greg, Greg, can you burp on command? Serious question. And then that started leading to a very serious conversation of he says maybe, but probably not in time. Very limited performance potentials with my burp, and I laughed for the rest of the night when I saw that. So when you're thinking of these like really unexpected, you like a really unexpected, like
Mhm.
tell me. I'd love to be inside the head of Joel Pierson for a second
Oh yeah.
when you're in that mode of thought.
Yeah. Well, yeah. My head tends to be a cluttered belfry of like like half baked ideas and stuff. But well, we're always working on new material, and I when we add new material, I just want to have other kinds of shtick that are involved. So yes, we're looking for the right kinds of films, looking for the right kind of music that features the musicians, but there's ways to feature the musicians aside from like, oh, listen to Mark play a saxophone solo or even a piano solo. I mean, how many people really want to go to a concert and hear 10 or 15 or 20 saxophone solos, right? You got to be a pretty hardcore jazz person to actually enjoy that. I don't enjoy that, So uh, those kinds of moments are very limited, right? Well, okay, well, in this number, there's 8 bars of a saxophone solo or 8 bars of a trumpet solo. So, but I want other ways to feature the musicians so that they're not just like, sitting in the dark in the corner. Like, you go to like a musical theater show and there's like a pit and the band, you can't even see them down there. And you're like, well, I guess there's music. Like that's such a waste of people's potential, in my opinion. So these guys are front and center, downstage, lots of instruments everywhere, but we're still not going to like torture an audience with like just unlimited wild, like free sections of pieces and things like that. So I want those other bits that say, well, this is also Mark. Yes, he can play the clarinet. Yes, he can play the saxophone. He can also solve a Rubik's Cube while playing the saxophone at the same time. And then it adds depth and adds color and it highlights the personalities of the musicians, which is really important because otherwise, I do the talking and stuff, and I don't want the guys to feel like they're just not getting any action. And I think the musicians are undervalued in this way. Like we're saying, like, in a musical theater, it's music and it's theater, but really it's like theater. Really, it's actors. That's most of it. So anyway, so we're working on a ton of new material for some new shows and for a bunch of stuff. So I had this just list of just like cockamamie ideas, and I'm slowly working through them. And the guys don't know what a bunch of them are yet, which is exciting. But the burping one was from a famous old piece by Spike Jones, who was like a sort of a comedian drummer in the 1940s, and he had this song he wrote called "Wyatt Earp Makes Me Burp," and it was this like Western number, and there was kind of like not like rapping, but kind of talking and rhythm and like over this thing, and then all about this town in the West and this bad guy, and he comes into town, and then every once in a while they mention Wyatt Earp, and then someone else just goes, Wyatt Earp, he makes me burp, and then burps, and they just move on like nothing happened, you know, and that happens over and over again in that song, and it's so funny, and I just thought, I mean, no one's performed that in 75 years, I bet. I mean, who would want to do that? You know, who would do that piece? So I'm not sure we're going to do it, but like, I was like, Greg's the guy that could do it if anyone, you know, who could just burp on command. So that's why I asked him. So there you go. That's the long explanation.
Well, I feel like you have to do it now. I mean, it just sounds too good not to, you know. But
Yeah,
you know,
it
one
is
thing
very
that
funny. Yes.
yeah, one thing that's interesting is so you were mentioning like, you know, uh, extending the theatrical and performance value beyond just the music, right? The music is that's the framework and that's the legs, but you want to feature your musicians to their fullest extent. And I think, you know, when I went to when I got to attend your show, and it was awesome. I got to hang out with you guys the night before. I you know, I felt like the kid from Almost Famous. I don't know if you guys seen that movie.
Okay.
No, I'm getting
No.
no. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm dating myself, but it was, you know, it was really awesome to get to meet you guys before, because that was the first time I actually met you guys, because you know, I'm here in like the Baltimore DMA. You guys are kind of everywhere, so that was the first time I get to meet you. And when I went to your show, it was your holiday show, and seeing the amount of kids in the audience was really awesome to see. You know, I always try to keep a marketing hat on, and seeing all of the smile and all of the excitement that you brought to these kids, you know, it really, your audience base is quite large, right? You have those that already have an appreciation for just great music, right? Music played live by masters of their craft, but then you also are introducing your music to a younger generation in a way that interests them, you know, and when you look at it from a marketing perspective, like, that's pretty brilliant in what you're doing. um did that all kind of just fall together that way, or was there that kind of strategy behind it, or that foresight, or
I mean, I
I
think
think that,
from
yeah, go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
so I was going to say, like, you know, we do market as a show for everyone. The show, one of our shows is actually called Ages 2 to 102. And one thing that's always amazed me, you know, as a musician who's, you know, been around the block a little bit and done a lot of different shows, the scope of the audience members and the comments afterwards is pretty mind blowing. We get, you know, people in the 70 plus range coming up, and they're just, you know, absolutely love the old music and the old cartoons and all the nostalgia and all this sort of thing. And then, you know, parents coming up with their 3-year-old saying that their 3-year-old never sits through anything and sat glued to our show and loved it. And I think just those two extremes, it's just incredible that it reaches that far. You know, it really is 2 to 102.
Yeah.
yeah. And
It's interesting
I
because
think
they,
one thing I really
yeah.
oh
No,
go ahead,
no,
Joel.
just quick to add to it is that it's an advantage that we have, that it appeals to a lot of people, but it's such an unusual thing in the sort of concert music world to appeal to such a wide range that it's actually also a marketing challenge. You know, like if someone who's going to book us,
Mhm.
or someone who wants to interview us, if they understand it, it's like, wow, this is such, the people will say thank you for kind of structuring it this way. But when you know, advertise and you say, this is a family show, meaning kids, then people go, no, that's for kids, and they don't want to go, you know.
Mhm.
So you have, I feel like it's still a struggle to convince a community, like if we get invited to go perform somewhere, to really find the way to convince a community that this is something that is a multi-generational experience and not just like a family show, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you can blame us greedy marketers for probably playing out like, you know, something for everyone, right? It's so you can blame the me's of the world for that, and it's tough. But I think it's something that's been done pretty flawlessly by you guys on like really catering to the different audience buckets that you have, right? And like on social media, you know, you're putting out a lot of content that has really, especially recently, has been pacing really well with your audience, and even outside of like your follower bubble. And it both revolves around your music and your comedy. And there was one, it's like name that body part that you guys put out there.
Mhm.
Where, Mark, talk a little bit about that content category and kind of where the idea came from and what it is.
I mean, I'll have to hand that one off to Joel. Joel's the creator behind the Name That Cartoon Body Part series, which is just another hit amongst the musicians getting smacked in the face with their own instruments and all sorts of crazy things. So Joel, maybe you can talk about where that came from.
I mean, honestly, it's like every what 6 to 9 months, it's like we need more content, and I'm not always so good at executing that stuff, but I will sit down and have like a coffee and a brainstorming session with myself and just think of like try to think of like stupidest things out there that again maybe are like not necessarily what you see. Like when you think about like musicians promoting themselves on social media, it's like look at me, I'm cool. Look at me, I'm wearing sunglasses at night. Look at me play something. And no, this is like I in slow motion like shove a double bass into a double bass player. You know what I mean? And that's musicians hitting themselves with their own instruments or whatever it's called. And same thing with name that cartoon body part. I just thought if you zoomed in on these famous characters in some little squiggles and a little bit of color and just took a little snapshot of it, maybe people would try to guess what it is. And so that's where that came from. But again, I can't really execute it. So I mean, I picked some snapshotted some cartoon characters and sent it to Mark or probably to Mark. And then eventually it looks nice and it gets out there. And that's where that came from.
Yeah, and we have one out there right now that's spoiler. Well, I think no, I guess it's not a spoiler. I think Mark put out on the brand like, all right, guys, let's throttle this back. But it's a very close up shot actually of Superman's armpit. And when I saw it
Yeah, of course.
post, I just it was gold. I'm like, well, boosting that because this is amazing. I said this is going to be an instant hit, and um, yeah, it's been interesting at seeing what the guesses are. It's when I need a
Sure.
chuckle throughout the day, I go on and look at the comments, and the hitting musicians with their instruments is hysterical because it's in slow mo and it has this like really melodic but like choppy recorder music in the background. It's like I've watched each one probably 100 times, just doing what I do for you guys, but I laugh every time just because it's so funny. And you guys are putting out other content that's like it's content that humanizes the brand. So your brand naturally has to have a human element because you're on stage, people want to know more about you. And a great way you guys have done that is through actually like repurposing your intermission uh, slideshow that you put up kind of in the middle of your show that has like Joel's is like unusual facts about Estonia. Mark's is
Yeah.
Aussie slang. Rawson, who's the drummer, he's from Bulgaria. It's like Bulgarian wisdom. It's and all of that content is highly engaged, right? It's always highly
Mhm.
engaged. Shower thoughts with Greg. I mean, it's you guys are extending your reach out beyond your followership because this content's very shareable. When you're
Mhm.
coming up with that content, are you are you thinking in that marketing frame of mind, or is it just kind of like, is it a gift? Because I mean, it's repurposing that content has really pushed your social up to the next peg
Yeah.
in how it performs or reaching more people. How did that all come to be? Is it just kind of we needed something for intermission, let's put our brains together and come up with something that'll make everyone smile, or how did that come to be?
No, no, I think you're right when you say it humanizes the musicians and it engages like that. It's very, I mean, I'm not a marketing person, but if you want to call that a marketing way of thinking, then that is what it is. I mean, immediately thinking, yeah, for like our pre-show and intermission videos, want them to be things that teach you about the band and kind of tell you what to expect without really telling you, what's going to happen. And then also, of course, doubles that you can use it for social media. But typically, yeah, I mean, I'll have the ideas and I come up with the stuff, but Mark tends to be the one who can kind of see through some of those things and is really good for bouncing those ideas off of. Just say like, yeah, this is working, or whatever. For example, I,
Hmm.
I love Joel's facts about Parnu County, Estonia. I mean, I love it. It's That's pushing it a little far. Like, I know that people don't get it. I had someone like I would do call on a call, and like I was looking at your socials, and like, are you Estonian? What's the connection? Why are you doing this? Why are you wasting my time with it? And I was like, it's just funny because it's the second most populous county in Estonia. It's something to something to consider throughout your day to day. I mean, social media feeds are so full of stuff you don't want to see, right? Like stuff that like actively like makes you less happy as a person, or can really bum you out or something. So if there's a heated debate about Superman's armpit, that's hilarious to me. The new one, I don't think we started Drew's new series yet, Mark. I don't think we have, but we have a really
I don't
good
think
one
it's
coming
gone
out. Yeah, so Kevin, this is the grand reveal of this. We're doing exotic animal laws by state, featuring Drew Pitcher. So Drew's going to talk about, how in whatever Massachusetts you can legally own, four macaques or whatever, but they have to be born, prior to 2005. Like the craziest laws ever. And again, it doesn't really teach you anything, but I don't know. It's fun. I like to see that kind of. I would like to see it on my social media as opposed to some of the other stuff I see.
Yeah, and I think as you shared that, I mean, I just grinned from ear to ear because that's hysterical. I'm excited to help get that out there, and I think social media is swampy, right? But I mean, um, I don't know about you guys. I may represent the extreme, but like my phone will give me like, here's how much screen time you've used last week, and it'll break it down by app and social medias. It's like
there.
it's an absurd amount of time.
Yeah.
It's probably not healthy, the amount of social media I digest, but it's your content brings a smile sometimes in a social feed that's can be a little dim and grim, right? I mean, there's a lot of dim and grim stuff, and I think your content also represents, not only does your content represent it, but even your show, it represents a breath of fresh air, right? It's like you can kind of let your guard down, kind of feel like you're a kid again with the cartoons, but also, listen to just the mastery of what you guys do with the instruments and the performance that you guys put out there. I mean, it really is, there's nothing like it out there. And um, I'd love to talk about for a few your guys' experience in Edinburgh. So,
Mm.
you guys were in Edinburgh, and the reason being is because the amount of promotion you guys had to do as like boots on the ground was really like handing out flyers and things like that. I mean, it was kind of 100 miles an hour from start to finish. I mean,
Mm.
tell me a little bit about in a really cutthroat festival where there's a ton of acts. Like, how did you guys you guys bubbled above the rest, and really became very quickly like. I mean, you're selling out the residency, right, in Edinburgh. I mean, you're putting on shows like every day for a month. Talk a little bit about that, just that experience, because that seemed to be such an awesome experience.
Right.
Yeah.
For it.
Yeah, sure. I know you're on a bit of a delay over there, Joel. So, yeah, I mean, it was amazing. It was such a different experience to what we're used to. In the US, we travel to, theaters and we put on a show and then we move on to another city. Doing a show in the same place every day for a month. And it was a shorter, abridged version of the show. All the Edinburgh Fringe Festival shows are about an hour. Um, and there was a few challenges, marketing wise and just general logistics, setting up and packing up in 15 minutes. We got really good at that by the end. And but yeah, we spent a lot of time most mornings out there in the streets handing out flyers. We had t-shirts. We were working with Aardman in the UK, which are the guys that produce Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep, and we had a few of their cartoons showing in our show, and so we just went around. Greg would play the theme song on the trumpet to get people's attention, and we'd hand stuff out, and it was very different, things we don't usually have to do or get to do in some ways. There was some element of fun, and when you're in amongst 40,000 other people handing out flyers, it's quite the experience.
Yeah, no, it seemed I think that was my first experience with you guys where like I wanted to be ready at the helm. You're in Scotland, I'm over here, throw me the content, I'll make sure it gets up there and a lot of the content of Greg playing, Aardman
Mm,
music in kind of an alleyway, right? Because that's like it kind of broke down the marketing to like really kind of the golden age of you know, performing out, in a very busy area to bring people in. I mean, it got a lot of engagement on social. It was for me, it was awesome to be a fly on the wall and um, I know it was a lot, right? That's a lot to pack in a
mm.
month, but it seemed like that's one of those, uh, you know, kind of check off your bucket list sort of things. Yeah. So tell me what's coming up. Actually, no. Let me ask you this. I've been asking everybody like throughout the whole journey of the Queen's Cartoonists. What's one thing that you would have done differently, kind of in hindsight? Joel, what do you think?
Mm.
Done differently. I don't know. I mean, there's certain things that were there's certain things we could have done earlier, but we didn't really know. That kind of stuff. Like to get from point A to point B, but maybe you don't really know what point B is for a while, and then you figure it out, and then it takes a while to reach it. And we're doing that now with some new ways to expand what we're doing and stuff like that. And it's like there's a destination, but it's kind of far away, and you can't really tell exactly which mountain it is that you have to climb. So I guess speeding those things up would be good. Um, but I don't know differently. I'd have
Mm.
to really think about it. I'm happy with the progress. I feel like we've made a real um, name for ourselves in the performing arts world, and did it pretty quickly. And then COVID got in the way, so that really slowed things down. But because that was right when we were picking up steam, but we've survived through it. So thanks to management and just well, we didn't have anything else to do, I guess, so we just stuck with it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to move at the speed that I want. There's just a lot. There's always a lot going on. Everyone is always maxed out in the amount of work they can do, and me too. And there's still, even though you have five people that are knocking heads together, and I'm working on it all the time, it still doesn't go as fast as I would like. Because I would like to be able to conceive of something, whether it's a social media uh, idea or a concert series or a country we want to go to or something. I would like to be able to make those things happen faster. Um,
Mm.
and so that's something I'm thinking about constantly, because for the guys, if I'm like, hey, let's do a new show and it's going to be this thing and it's going to be an absolute ton of work and it'll premiere in 2 years, you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff is really, it's a tough sell. And I mean, it usually works out for us and stuff, but it's a long, big, the snowball takes a long time to get down the hill sometimes. And that's, can be frustrating, and I would love to see that. If you're a singer songwriter, you can lock yourself in a cabin for a month and write an album, and you can go out and play it and connect with people, very immediately and very personally. And for us, it's so technical between the performance side and the multimedia side and the kind of places we play. It's a huge operation.
I'd like to add to that. I think, that slow burn process it takes for us to come up with anything and produce it, I think can be beneficial in many ways because it gives us time to really think and like hone in on exactly how to present something and refine the ideas. And so when we do eventually present a show, like for example, we've got a new show we're premiering this fall that has been in the making for a few years at least. But it gives us time to really curate it to exactly how we want it, and we present it in a way we want it, rather than putting it out there and then thinking, that wasn't probably as good as we could have. And I think that goes back to your question about things we would have done differently. I think hindsight is amazing, but everything kind of happened for the right reasons, which, is pretty cliche, but the things that we might have done differently had we known, I think also had their merit in getting us to where we are today in a way that we did it. Um, and yeah, I think just having that time to build has been useful for us in some ways.
Yeah, and I think I think I can't say that I've worked with you guys kind of in the early days, but watching your growth so quickly and seeing you guys heading out of the country to perform. I mean, it's been amazing. I think the time spent was a great investment in getting your show to where it is now because it's absolutely incredible, and I'm excited to see the new show in the fall. Um, where can people go? So I'll say, make sure for everyone listening, make sure you're following the Queen's Cartoonists on Facebook, Instagram. You're on Twitter, you're on TikTok, YouTube. Subscribe to their YouTube channel. Make sure that you guys are there because you're going to see awesome content. But tell me a little bit more about like what's next for the Queen's Cartoonists. You mentioned you have a new show debuting in the fall. Where can people go to see where you'll be performing and get tickets?
Yeah, well, first thing I don't want to forget to say that in the new show, Mark is going to wear a panda suit, so don't don't miss that as part of a number. I think the best places are Instagram and then just our website. Website we take a lot of put in a lot of effort to keep it updated and to keep it looking engaging. You know, so that those are the best places. I mean, Facebook, everything goes on Facebook too. We're less active on Twitter and TikTok for sure, but Instagram tends to be good. And it's a more of a positive platform probably anyway. So but then yeah, website and that. We have a new newsletter we're working on. Super excited about our monthly newsletter, which so far is about 20% actual information and 80% just like, please don't unsubscribe. Here's a joke. Let's make fun of ourselves a little bit, that kind of thing. We just sent one out like for new subscribers, and I think we had 5 opportunities to opt out in the text instead of one little buried one at the bottom. It's like, seriously, if you're just reading this and you're like, I hate this, here you go. And then like next paragraph, like again, here you go. Just go ahead. Just get out of here. Like have like five. I'm curious to see how many people actually opt out. I thought it's such a funny way. That's the opposite way of everyone else does email lists. That hopefully people will respect that and will stay on. But that's kind of how we think, right? Is like, what's the way you do it, and then how can we do it a little differently, and use what we have to the best that we can.
And I think it's also important to note that of the 5 or 6 opt-out options, one of them was a Rickroll, but you had to click
One
it
of
to
them was a
find out.
Rickroll. Yeah,
Fantastic, man. Well, that just brought my anxiety level from like 10 down to like 7 when when I heard like we're giving 5 opt-outs, but let's say if that it's interesting if that respect if people respect that, how brilliant will be to as a man. Whew, like I'm shaking like that just hearing that as a marketer, but it's such an awesome idea when you think about it. Yeah, I mean it there's humor in that, and I think you guys have a great way of finding humor in very unorthodox ways, right? New ways and exciting ways that people people can understand and laugh at. So that's awesome. Gents, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. For anyone listening, thequeenscartoonist.com. Go there, check out where they're going to be this fall. Get tickets. The show is absolutely incredible. This is not a sponsored podcast. This is my genuine endorsement of how awesome the show is. Follow them on social media. Give these guys some love because they're doing great things.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks for having us.
You got it. All right. Five Dubs Marketing Pros is hosted by me, Kevin Barrier. Our executive producer is MDDC Executive Director Rebecca Snyder. Post-production by Caroline Pecora. Our theme music is by Azulu Studio. A special thank you to our guests for being with us. You can find Five Dubs and Five Dubs Marketing Pros on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts.